The security office was cold and sterile. Tejo sat in a metal chair, hands cuffed to the table in front of him. He'd been here for 6 hours already. No food, no water, just questions. The same questions over and over again. Why did you approach? The Vraxil child, the interrogator asked for the 20th time. She was human, Commander Jiwoo Park, the station's head of security. Her face was tired, but her eyes were sharp. Because he needed help, Tejo said again. His voice was rough from talking so much. That's all. You know the treaties, Jiwoo said. She leaned forward, her hands flat on the table. Physical contact between humans and Vraxil is restricted, especially involving minors. You served in the war. You know why these rules exist. I know people are afraid, Tejo replied. Afraid of each other. Afraid of what might happen if we actually treat each other like living beings instead of enemies. Jiwoo sighed and rubbed her face. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. The Vraxil delegation is demanding your arrest, full charges, assault with intent, treaty violations. They want you sent to a Vraxil prison. Tejo felt his stomach drop. Vraxil prisons were death sentences for humans. The atmospheric conditions alone would kill him in months, not to mention what the guards might do to a human veteran. I didn't hurt him, Tejo said quietly. I just wanted to help. I know, Jiwoo said. She glanced at the door, then back to him. I saw the footage. Everyone saw the footage. Tejo blinked. Footage? Jiwoo pulled out a tablet and turned it toward him. The screen showed the marketplace from an elevated angle. Tejo watched himself walk toward Kel, watched himself kneel down, watched the moment their hands touched. A Chitara merchant recorded it, Jiwoo explained. He sold it to a news network. It's gone viral across the entire galaxy. 3 billion views in 6 hours. Every species is talking about it. She swiped through the tablet, showing him headlines from different worlds. Human veteran shows mercy to enemy child. Touching moment on Station Theta 7. War hero breaks protocol for disabled Vraxil. The images showed his face, Kel's face, the moment of connection. Some people think you're a hero, Jiwoo continued. They say you showed true humanity, compassion beyond war. Others think you're a threat. A human approaching a vulnerable Vraxil child, especially a veteran, looks like predatory behavior to them. Tejo stared at the screen. He looked different than he remembered. Older, sadder. But in that moment with Kel, his face had something it hadn't had in years. Hope, maybe. Or purpose. What do you think? He asked Jiwoo. She was quiet for a long moment. I think you did what your heart told you was right. I also think you've created a diplomatic nightmare that might get people killed. Both things can be true. The door opened. A young human officer stuck his head in. Commander, the Vraxil ambassador is here with his security team. They're demanding immediate transfer of the prisoner. Jiwoo stood up. Tell them I need 15 more minutes. Ma'am? They're not asking. 15 minutes, Jiwoo repeated, her voice hard. That's an order. The officer left. Jiwoo looked down at Tejo. I'm going to do everything I can to keep you out of Vraxil custody. But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about you anymore. That child, Kel, he's become a symbol. People across the galaxy are researching his story. What story? Tejo asked. Jiwoo pulled up more files on her tablet. Kel was born with his disability on a Vraxil colony world. His birth family abandoned him. As is traditional in their culture, physical weakness is considered shameful. Genetic defects are seen as failures. He was supposed to die. Tejo felt anger building in his chest again. But he didn't. No, Jiwoo confirmed. An old Vraxil engineer named Veth found him and took him in, broke all kinds of cultural taboos to raise him. Veth brought Kel here to the station 5 years ago. He's been living in the lower maintenance levels, hiding basically, while Veth worked to keep them both fed. Where's Veth now? Tejo asked. Jiwoo's expression grew darker. Dying. Cancer equivalent in Vraxil biology. He has maybe 2 months left. After that, Kel gets deported to a Vraxil institution. They're basically warehouses for the unwanted. No care, no education, just waiting to die. That's not right, Teho said. No, it's not, Jiwoo agreed. But it's their law, their culture. We can't interfere. I just did, Teho pointed out. A small smile crossed Jiwoo's face. Yes, you did. And now the whole galaxy is arguing about whether that was brave or criminal. I've got reports coming in from everywhere. Human colonies are holding vigils for you. Vraxil officials are demanding justice. But here's the interesting part. She pulled up another file. Young Vraxil, especially those who survived the war, are speaking out. They're questioning the old ways, asking why Kel should be punished for something he didn't choose, asking why compassion is considered weakness. Your one moment with that child has started something. I didn't mean to start anything, Teho said. I just saw a kid who needed help. Sometimes that's how revolutions begin, Jiwoo said. One person deciding that the old rules don't make sense anymore. One act of kindness in a universe full of hate. The door opened again. This time a full security team entered. Behind them came a tall Vraxil in formal diplomatic armor. His antennae were rigid with anger. Commander Park, the Vraxil ambassador said in perfect galactic common. You have delayed long enough. The prisoner will be transferred to Vraxil custody immediately. Jiwoo stepped between Teho and the ambassador. Ambassador Theknor, the prisoner is still under investigation. Station law gives me jurisdiction until charges are formally filed. Charges have been filed. Theknor clicked his mandibles sharply. Assault, treaty violations, endangerment of a Vraxil minor. The prisoner will face trial on Vraxil Prime. Like hell he will, a new voice said. Everyone turned. A woman in civilian clothes walked into the room, carrying a briefcase and looking, completely unafraid of the armed guards surrounding her. She was human, probably in her 30s, with sharp eyes and a confident stride. Who are you? Theknor demanded. Da-Yun Choi, the woman said. Attorney at law, I represent Teho Kim. And unless you have a valid extradition order signed by the Galactic Council, my client isn't going anywhere. Theknor's antennae quivered with rage. This is a Vraxil matter. Human lawyers have no authority. Station Theta 7 is neutral territory, Da-Un replied calmly. Which means galactic law applies. My client has the right to legal representation and a fair trial. You can't just drag him off because you're angry. We will see what the council says, Theknor hissed. He turned to his security team. Contact Vraxil Prime. Begin formal extradition procedures. I want this human in chains within the cycle. The Vraxil delegation left. Da-Un waited until the door closed, then turned to Jiwoo. Thanks for the call, Commander. Jiwoo nodded. I can give you maybe a day before the council makes a decision. Use it wisely. Da-Un looked at Teho. Her eyes were sad but determined. I lost my brother in the war, Battle of Kepler 442. He died in the first wave. Teho felt like he'd been punched. I'm sorry, I was there. It was bad. I know you were there, Da-Un said softly. I read your file. You held the line when everyone else fell. You saved 30 civilians, you're a hero. I'm not a hero, Teho said. I'm just tired of watching people suffer. Da-Un smiled slightly. That's exactly why I'm going to help you. Because if we can't show compassion to a child, then what did my brother die for? What did any of them die for? She opened her briefcase and pulled out documents. Now let's figure out how to keep you alive and free. We have a fight ahead of us. The galaxy is watching. Let's give them something worth seeing. The tribunal chamber was massive. Representatives from 20 different species sat in curved rows that rose toward the ceiling. Holographic displays floated everywhere, translating speech into hundreds of languages simultaneously. The air hummed with technology and tension. Teho sat at the defense table wearing simple civilian clothes. Ta-Yun was on his left, reviewing documents on her tablet. On his right sat Mekthar, a Vraxil lawyer who had defected during the war. His presence at the defense table had caused an uproar among the Vraxil delegation, but Mekthar had refused to back down. Traitor sits with traitor, Ambassador Theknor had hissed when Mekthar first appeared. How appropriate. The prosecution table was crowded with Vraxil officials in formal armor. Theknor led the team, his antennae constantly moving as he communicated with his assistants in rapid clicks and chirps. They had brought 30 witnesses and hundreds of evidence files. This wasn't just a trial. It was a statement. Judge Arbitrator Velmon called the session to order. She was a Thalgrim, one of the warrior species, known for being fair but ruthless in pursuit of justice. Her 4 arms gestured for silence, and the chamber immediately quieted. We are gathered to determine the guilt or innocence of Tae-Ho Kim, human in the matter of alleged assault and treaty violations, Velmon announced. Her voice echoed through the chamber. Prosecution, present your opening statement. Theknor rose smoothly. He was an impressive speaker, Tae-Ho had to admit. Confident, passionate, dangerous. Honored arbitrator, members of the tribunal, Theknor began. The facts of this case are simple. The defendant, a veteran of the war against our people, approached a vulnerable Vraxel child in violation of clearly established protocols. This was not an accident. It was not a mistake. It was a calculated act of intimidation. Holographic displays lit up, showing footage of the marketplace. Tae-Ho watched himself approach Kel from multiple angles. The prosecution had edited the footage carefully, cutting out the context, making it look predatory. Look at him, Theknor continued, pointing at the frozen image of Tae-Ho, a trained killer, a soldier who admits to eliminating Vraxil warriors during combat. He sees a helpless child alone and defenseless, and he moves toward him. What would any reasonable being think? That this human meant harm? Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some of the alien representatives nodded. Others looked uncertain. Theknor played more footage. Battles from the war. Human soldiers firing weapons. Vraxil casualties. It was brutal and effective. By the time he finished, half the room was looking at Tae-Ho like he was a monster. The treaties exist for a reason, Theknor concluded, to prevent exactly this kind of situation. To protect the vulnerable from those who might wish them harm. The defendant violated those treaties. He must face consequences, or the peace we have fought so hard to maintain will crumble. Thank you, he sat down. The chamber buzzed with whispered conversations. Dayun stood up. She looked small compared to Theknor, but her voice was steady and clear. Honored arbitrator, members of the tribunal, she began. The prosecution wants you to see my client as a threat, a killer, a danger to innocent children. They have shown you war footage and talked about violence, but they have not shown you the truth. She activated her own holographic display. The footage showed the full context. Kel struggling alone. Other Vraxil walking past him. The child's desperate attempts to move. This is what Tae-Ho Kim saw, Daun said. Not an enemy. Not a threat. Just a child suffering. A child that his own people had abandoned. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Several Vraxil representatives shifted uncomfortably. My client is not a monster, Daun continued. He is a veteran suffering from combat trauma. He lives alone. He takes medication for nightmares. He lost his entire unit in the war. He has every reason to hate the Vraxil people. But when he saw a child in need, he chose compassion over hate. He chose to help rather than walk away like everyone else. She showed footage of Tae-Ho kneeling down. The gentle way he raised his hands. The moment he showed Kel his prosthetic leg, connecting their shared experiences of disability. The prosecution says the treaties exist to protect the vulnerable, Daun said. But who was protecting Kel? Who was making sure he had food, shelter, care? Not his own people. Not the station authorities, no one. Until Tae-Ho Kim decided that compassion was more important than fear. The chamber was completely silent now. Every eye was on Daun. We will prove that my client meant no harm, she continued. We will show that his actions, far from being criminal, were heroic. And we will ask you to decide what kind of galaxy we want to live in. One where we are ruled by fear and hatred, or one where we have the courage to be kind, even to those we once called enemies. She sat down. Tae-Ho felt his throat tight with emotion. He hadn't expected her to be this good. The trial continued for 3 days. The prosecution brought witnesses who testified about human violence during the war. They brought psychologists who claimed Tae-Ho was unstable. They brought treaty experts who explained in exhausting detail every rule he had broken. Daun countered each point. She brought character witnesses who spoke about Tae-Ho's service record and his heroism. She brought medical experts who explained his trauma and how he had been managing it successfully. She brought legal scholars who argued that the treaties were meant to prevent violence, not compassion. But the turning point came on the third day when Dayun called her final witness. "The defense calls Kel to testify," she announced. The chamber erupted in chaos. The prosecution objected furiously. The Vraxel delegation stood up shouting. Judge Velmon had to pound her gavel repeatedly to restore order. "The child is a minor." Theknor protested. "He cannot be called to testify." "The child is the alleged victim," Dayun countered. "He has the right to speak about what happened, unless the prosecution is afraid of what he might say." Velmon considered for a long moment. "The child will testify via hologram for his safety." Objection overruled. A holographic projection materialized in the center of the chamber. Kel appeared, small and fragile-looking. His twisted legs were visible, as was his malnourished body. Several tribunal members gasped at his condition. Dayan approached the hologram gently. "Kel, can you tell us what happened the day you met Taiho?" Kel's voice was quiet, speaking in broken Galactic Common. "I was hungry, tired, people walked past. No one stopped. I thought I would die there." "Then what happened?" Dayun asked. "The man with the metal leg came," Kel said. His antennae twitched with the memory. "He looked sad like me, broken like me." He kneeled down, he smiled. "He said I was not alone." "Were you afraid of him?" Dayun asked. Kel's antennae moved in a negative gesture. "No, he had kind eyes." Soft voice. "He showed me his leg. Same as mine. Both broken. Both still here," he said. "Did Taiho hurt you in any way?" "No, he came back. Every day. Brought food. Brought water. Taught me exercises. Made my legs stronger." Kel's voice grew emotional. He talked about hope. About tomorrow. He didn't talk about war. He didn't talk about hate. He just talked about being kind. The chamber was completely silent. Several representatives were wiping their eyes. "Kel, did you know Taiho was human when you first met him?" Dayun asked. "No," Kel said. "I only knew he was kind." "That was enough," Dayun nodded. "Thank you, Kel. No further questions." Theknor stood up to cross-examine, but one look at Kel's face and he seemed to lose his confidence. "No questions," he said quietly and sat back down. The hologram faded. Judge Velmon called for closing arguments. Both sides gave their final speeches, but everyone knew the trial had already been decided. Kel's testimony had changed everything. The tribunal deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the chamber was packed with observers from across the galaxy, all watching via hologram. "On the charge of assault with intent, we find the defendant not guilty," Judge Velmon announced. "On the charge of treaty violations, we find the defendant not guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, we find the defendant not guilty." Relief flooded through Taiho's body. Dayun grabbed his hand and squeezed. "However," Velmon continued, "the defendant is hereby banned from Vraxel space permanently. Any future contact with Vraxel citizens will result in immediate arrest." This tribunal is adjourned. The chamber erupted in noise. Some people cheered. Others protested. Taiho just sat there, free but feeling strangely empty. He had won. But Kel was still going to be deported, still going to suffer. The victory felt hollow. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The vote took 3 hours. Each representative spoke their piece, explaining their position. The chamber was tense with anticipation. Every word mattered. Every vote could change everything. Taiho sat at the defense table, hands clasped tightly together. Dayun kept glancing at her tablet, trying to count votes as they came in. Mekthar's antennae twitched constantly, a sign of his nervousness. Finally, Judge Velmon called for the final tally. The holographic display showed the numbers in real time. 24 votes in favor. 22 votes against. 1 vote remaining. The last representative was a Pelnari, an aquatic species known for their neutrality and careful consideration. Representative Velsha floated in her water tank, her bioluminescent body pulsing with thought. "This decision has troubled me greatly," Velsha said, her voice translated through her tank's speakers. "I have weighed the arguments. I have considered the precedents. I have thought about the implications for galactic society. But in the end I returned to a simple truth." She paused, her light pulsing brighter. "A child is suffering. A person capable of caring for that child is offering to help. Everything else is politics and fear. I vote in favor." The chamber exploded with noise. Cheers, protests, shouting. Velmon pounded her gavel until order was restored. "The council has voted 25 in favor. 22 against, she announced. Temporary custody is granted to Tae-ho Kim, pending completion of full adoption proceedings. The child Kel will be released to his care immediately. Tae-ho couldn't breathe. Dayun was hugging him. Mekthar's antennae were waving in celebration. It felt unreal, impossible, but it had happened. The Vraxil delegation stormed out of the chamber. Ambassador Theknor paused at the door, his antennae rigid with anger. "This is not over," he hissed. "We will appeal. We will fight this every step of the way." "Do what you must," Elder Shenrak replied calmly. "We will do what is right." The formal custody transfer happened 2 days later. Station authorities brought Kel to a small ceremonial room. The child looked frightened and confused, his eyes searching the crowd. When he saw Tae-ho, his entire body relaxed. Tae-ho knelt down, ignoring the pain in his prosthetic leg. "Hey, kid. Ready to come home?" Kel's antennae moved in what Tae-ho had learned was a smile. "Home with you?" "With me," Tae-ho confirmed. He held out his hand. Kel placed his small limb in Tae-ho's palm without hesitation. The adoption ceremony was brief but meaningful. Judge Velmon presided, reading the formal declaration. "By the authority granted to me by the Galactic Council, I hereby place Kel under the guardianship of Tae-ho Kim. May this union bring peace and hope to both individuals and to the galaxy watching." Media from across the galaxy broadcast the moment. When Tae-ho placed his hand on Kel's shoulder and the child wrapped his limbs around Tae-ho's arm, billions of beings watched in silence. Some with joy, some with anger, but all of them witnessing something unprecedented. The practical challenges came immediately. Tae-ho's tiny apartment couldn't accommodate both of them. His income barely covered his own needs. Kel needed medical care, education, specialized equipment for his disability. The list of problems seemed endless, but help came from everywhere. The Veterans Fundraising Campaign had raised enough money for Tae-ho to rent a larger apartment. Human doctors and Vraxil medical engineers worked together to design mobility assistance devices for Kel. A teacher from the Chitara Education Collective volunteered to tutor the child. Commander Jiwoo offered Tae-ho a better job in station maintenance, with flexible hours so he could care for Kel. "Consider it payment for making my station famous," she said with a slight smile. "Also, you're exactly the kind of person we need working here. Someone who gives a damn." The first week was hard. Kel had nightmares. So did Tae-ho. Sometimes they would both wake up in the middle of the night scared and alone. But they learned to help each other. When Kel woke up crying, Tae-ho would sit with him and tell him stories. When Tae-ho's combat memories became too much, Kel would crawl over and just sit beside him, offering silent companionship. Slowly, they built a routine. Mornings were for physical therapy. Kel's legs were getting stronger with the exercises. He couldn't walk normally, but with his new mobility frame he could move around independently. Afternoons were for learning. Kel absorbed information like a sponge, learning galactic common and human language simultaneously. Evenings were for cooking together. Tae-ho taught Kel how to make simple meals. Kel taught Tae-ho Vraxil hand signals for communication. The galaxy watched their progress. News outlets ran regular updates. Some coverage was positive, showing the touching moments of connection. Other coverage was negative, focusing on the difficulties and predicting failure. But something unexpected happened. Other people started reaching out. A human family adopted a Chitara orphan. A Thalgrim warrior took in a disabled Pelnari child. The Kel Initiative, a program providing resources for disabled individuals across all species, was established by the Galactic Council with overwhelming support. Young Vraxil on their homeworld organized protests demanding cultural reform. They carried signs with Kel's image and messages about accepting difference. Elder Shenrak became a spokesperson for change within Vraxil society. "We cannot claim to be advanced," he said in speeches, "if we abandon our own children." Not everyone was happy. Extremist groups on both sides issued threats. Security around Tae-ho and Kel was increased, but the threats only made more people speak up in support. The silent majority found their voice. 6 months after the adoption, Tae-ho and Kel moved to a small colony on the frontier. It was neutral territory, a place where humans and Vraxil were learning to coexist. The colony needed workers, and Tae-ho's mechanical skills were valuable. They found a modest house with a yard where Kel could practice walking. The house became a gathering place. Other families, both human and alien, would visit. Children would play together, their differences forgotten in the simple joy of games and laughter. Adults would share meals and stories, slowly building bridges across chasms of war and hate. Kel started attending a mixed-species school. The first day, Tejo was terrified. What if the other children were cruel? What if Kel was bullied or hurt? But when he picked Kel up that afternoon, the child was surrounded by friends. A human girl was showing him her drawings. A Thalgrim boy was teaching him a game. A young Vraxel, one of the few others in the colony, was sitting beside him in companionable silence. "How was school?" Tejo asked as they walked home. "Good," Kel said, his galactic common now nearly fluent. "I made friends. They don't care that my legs are different. They just care that I'm nice." Tejo felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's how it should be." "Because of you," Kel said, looking up at him. "You showed everyone it's okay to be different. Okay to care about someone who isn't the same species." "I just saw a kid who needed help," Tejo replied. "You saw me when no one else did," Kel corrected. "That made all the difference." One evening, they sat on their porch watching the triple sunset. The colony's sun system created breathtaking displays of purple and gold across the sky. Kel was practicing with his mobility frame, taking careful steps back and forth. He stumbled on an uneven board. Tejo caught him automatically, his reflexes still sharp from military training. "I've got you." "I know," Kel said, steadying himself. "You always do." In the distance, a mixed group of human and Vraxil children played in a park that had been built through joint effort. Their laughter carried on the wind, a sound that would have been impossible a year ago. Adults from both species watched from benches, talking cautiously but talking nonetheless. Above them, a transport ship descended toward the colony's landing pad. It carried the first delegation of Vraxil students coming to study human medicine and prosthetics technology. More were expected in the coming weeks. Cultural exchange programs were being established. Joint research projects were beginning. The wounds of war remained. They always would. Some families on both sides would never forgive. Some hatred would never fade. But new growth was happening. Slowly, painfully, hopefully. Tejo looked down at Kel, who was now strong enough to stand on his own with his frame. The child who had been abandoned and left to die was thriving, learning, growing, becoming, and Tejo, the broken veteran who had lost everything, had found something he thought was gone forever: purpose, family, love. On Vraxil Prime, in a garden dedicated to healing, a statue stood in a place of honor. It showed a figure kneeling beside a child, hand extended in offering. The plaque at its base read simply, "The Choice." Below that, in smaller text, "In memory of all who died in war, and in hope for all who choose peace." Visitors came daily to see it. Some left flowers, some left messages. All of them stood in silence for a moment, thinking about what the statue represented. Not victory, not defeat. Something harder and more important. The choice to care when caring was difficult. The choice to help when help was dangerous. The choice to see another being suffering and decide that it mattered. The galaxy had watched in silence when a human veteran approached a disabled alien boy. Now the galaxy spoke in countless voices about what that moment meant. Teachers used it in lessons about compassion. Leaders referenced it in speeches about cooperation. Parents told their children the story as an example of courage. The celebrations didn't last long. Tejo returned to his small apartment on the station to find messages flooding his communication device. Hundreds of them, thousands. Some were congratulations, others were death threats. The galaxy was divided right down the middle about what he had done, but all Tejo could think about was Kel. He sat on his bed and pulled up the news feeds. The headlines were all about his acquittal, but buried in the smaller stories was the truth. Veth, Kel's guardian, had died during the trial. Station authorities were preparing to deport Kel to a Vraxil institution within the week. The images showed Kel being led through corridors by officials, his small body trembling, his eyes searching for someone who wasn't there. Someone knocked on the door. Tejo opened it to find Daun standing there with Mekthar behind her. They both looked tired but determined. "We need to talk," Daun said. They sat in his tiny living room. Tejo made tea, human style, and they drank in silence for a moment. "I have an idea," Daun finally said. "It's crazy, Probably impossible. Definitely dangerous. But I think it's the right thing to do. What is it? Teho asked. Adopt him, Daun said simply. Adopt Kel. Teho stared at her. That's not possible. Actually, it might be. Mekthar clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Galactic law does allow for cross-species adoption in cases of extreme need. It's never been attempted between former enemy species, but technically it's legal. Technically legal and actually possible are two different things, Teho said. The Vraxel would never allow it. I'm banned from Vraxel space. I can barely take care of myself. I live in a one-room apartment. I have nightmares. I'm broke. How could I possibly be a good guardian for anyone? Dayan leaned forward. Because you already are. You've been visiting him every day since you were released. Don't think I haven't noticed. You bring him food. You talk to him. You make him smile. That's what a parent does. I'm not his parent, Teho said quietly. I'm just someone who didn't want to see him suffer. That's exactly what a parent is, Daun replied. Someone who chooses to care. Someone who decides that another person's well-being matters more than their own comfort. Teho stood up and walked to the window. Below he could see the marketplace where he had first met Kel. Life continued as normal. People buying and selling, living their lives, ignoring the suffering right in front of them. Even if I wanted to, he said, the process would take years, cost more money than I'll ever have, and Kel would be deported long before we could finish. Not if we move fast, Dawn said. She pulled out her tablet. I've been researching this for 3 days. There's a provision in galactic law for emergency adoptions. If we can prove that Kel faces immediate danger, we can petition the council for temporary custody while the full adoption is processed. The Vraxil will fight it, Mekthar added. They will fight it with everything they have. This will be political suicide for both of you. The attention will be constant and brutal. Are you prepared for that? Teho thought about Kel's eyes. The way they had looked at him with trust and hope. The way the child had smiled when he showed him exercises to strengthen his legs. The way Kel had said, "You make tomorrow better." Yes, Teho said. I'm prepared. Daun smiled. Then let's get to work. The next 2 weeks were chaos. Daun filed the emergency petition with the Galactic Council. The response from the Vraxil government was immediate and furious. They filed counter-petitions. They called for sanctions against humans. They accused Teho of kidnapping, even though Kel was still in station custody. The media coverage was intense. Every news outlet in the galaxy ran stories about the controversial adoption attempt. Opinion pieces flooded the networks. Some praised Teho's courage. Others called him delusional or dangerous. The hate messages to his communication device tripled, but support came from unexpected places. A group of human veterans started a fundraising campaign to help with legal costs. The donations poured in from across human space and beyond. Chitara merchants contributed. Thalgrim warriors sent messages of respect. Even some young Vraxil citizens began speaking out in support. This is about more than one child, a Vraxil student posted on the networks. This is about whether we will let fear rule us forever, or whether we will choose to evolve. Commander Jiwoo used her authority to keep Kel on the station during the proceedings. She faced pressure from her superiors, but she held firm. The child stays until the council makes a decision, she announced publicly. I won't send him into danger while his fate is being decided. Mekthar worked day and night, researching Vraxil adoption law and finding precedents. There's a historical provision, he discovered. Ancient Vraxil law allowed adoption by any individual deemed worthy of character, regardless of species. It hasn't been used in centuries, but it's still technically valid. Dayan built the case around this provision. She gathered character witnesses. She compiled medical reports showing Kel's improvement since meeting Teho. She documented the conditions in Vraxil institutions for disabled individuals. The evidence was overwhelming, but the opposition was fierce. Ambassador Theknor personally led the fight against the adoption. He appeared on news programs, giving interviews about the dangers of allowing cross-species adoptions. This sets a precedent that will destroy cultural boundaries, he argued. If we allow this, where does it end? The council scheduled a hearing. It would be the final decision. Representatives from 47 species would vote on whether to grant Teho temporary custody. A simple majority was needed, but nothing about this situation was simple. The night before the hearing, Teho couldn't sleep. He paced his apartment, drinking tea and trying not to think about failure. What would happen to Kel if he lost? Would the child think he had been abandoned again? His communication device buzzed. A message from an unknown source. Tejo opened it carefully, expecting another threat. Instead, it was a video. Kel appeared on the screen, his small face uncertain but brave. "Tejo," Kel said in his improving galactic common. "Dayun taught me how to make message. I want to say thank you. You showed me kindness when no one else did. You made me feel like I matter, like I deserve to live. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know you changed my life. You gave me hope. That is the greatest gift anyone can give." The video ended. Tejo sat down heavily, tears streaming down his face. He had spent 3 years feeling broken and useless. 3 years wondering why he survived when so many others died. 3 years searching for a reason to keep going. Now he had one. The next morning, the council chamber was packed. Security was heavy due to threats from extremist groups on both sides. Tejo sat at a table with Daun and Mekthar, facing the assembled representatives. Judge Velmon presided again. She looked even more serious than during the trial. "This is an unprecedented case," she announced. "We are not simply deciding the fate of one child. We are deciding what kind of galaxy we wish to build, one ruled by old hatreds or one open to new possibilities." Daun presented the case. She was brilliant, citing laws and precedents, showing evidence of Tejo's care for Kel, demonstrating the danger the child faced in Vraxil institutions. She spoke about evolution and growth, about choosing compassion over fear. Thekanor presented the opposition. He spoke about cultural integrity, about the dangers of erasing boundaries between species, about the importance of maintaining order in a fragile peace. He was passionate and convincing. When both sides finished, Velmon asked if anyone else wished to speak. A long silence followed. Then slowly, a Vraxil representative stood up. Elder Shenrak, one of the oldest members of the council. He had been silent throughout the proceedings, but now his presence commanded attention. "I lost 3 offspring in the war," Shenrak said quietly. His voice was thick with emotion. 3 children who will never return. I have every reason to hate humans. Every reason to demand that old boundaries remain firm. He paused, his antennae drooping. But I have been watching this case. I have been reading about Kel, about his suffering, about how his own people abandoned him because he was born different. And I must ask myself, what did my children die for? Did they die so we could continue to abandon our own? Did they die so we could remain trapped in hatred? His antennae rose again stronger. I say no. I say they died so we could build something better. Something worthy of their sacrifice. This human Tejo Kim has shown us what that looks like. Caring for those who cannot care for themselves. Choosing kindness over revenge. If we cannot see the value in that, then we learn nothing from the war. He looked directly at Thekanor. I vote to grant custody to Tejo Kim. And I challenge my fellow Vraxil to ask themselves what kind of species they wish to be. One that abandons its weak, or one that honors life in all its forms? The chamber erupted in conversation. The marketplace on Station Theta 7 was always crowded during the 3rd cycle. Tejo limped through the masses of alien bodies, his prosthetic leg clicking softly against the metal floor. He kept his head down and his hands in his pockets. That was the best way to survive these days. Don't look at anyone. Don't start trouble. Just get through another day. The war had been over for 3 years, but nobody seemed to remember that. Humans still glared at the Vraxil with their insect-like bodies and multiple legs. The Vraxil clicked their mandibles in disgust when humans passed by. Peace was just a word on paper. Hate was still alive and breathing in every corner of the galaxy. Tejo adjusted the strap of his bag and kept walking. He had a shipment to inspect at Dock 17. Easy work, boring work. The kind of work that didn't require thinking. That was good. Thinking led to remembering, and remembering led to the nightmares. He had enough of those already. The crowd suddenly went quiet. Tejo looked up, curious despite himself. In a galaxy full of noise and chaos, silence was unusual. Dangerous, even. He saw the child immediately. A young Vraxil, small and thin, struggling near a waste disposal unit. The child's lower appendages were twisted and wrong, dragging uselessly behind his body. He tried to pull himself forward with his upper limbs, but he was weak. Tired. His breathing came in short, desperate gasps. Other Vraxil walked past the child without stopping. Some looked away quickly. Others stared for a moment, their antennae twitching in what Tejo had learned was disgust, then moved on. A Vraxil merchant actually stepped over the child like he was trash. Tejo felt something twist in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Anger, maybe. Or sadness. Or both mixed together until he couldn't tell them apart anymore. He knew he should keep walking. This wasn't his problem. The child was Vraxil, the enemy. The same species that had killed his entire unit. The same species that had left him bleeding and broken on Kepler 442, surrounded by the bodies of his friends. But the child's eyes found his across the crowd. Large compound eyes that reflected the station lights like tiny mirrors. There was no hate in those eyes. Just fear and pain and desperate hope that someone, anyone, would help. Tejo's feet moved before his brain could stop them. He walked toward the child, each step feeling heavier than the last. The marketplace went completely silent now. Every eye turned toward him. He could feel the weight of their stares. Human, Vraxil, Chitara, Thalgrim, all of them watching to see what would happen. Security drones hummed to life above, their sensors focusing on the potential threat. Station security was probably already on their way. Approaching a Vraxil child as a human was asking for trouble. It broke about 15 different protocols and at least 3 treaties. Tejo didn't care. He knelt down next to the child, feeling his prosthetic leg protest at the angle. Up close, the child was even smaller than he thought. Maybe 8 years old by Vraxil standards. His exoskeleton was dull and cracked in places, showing signs of malnutrition. The twisted legs were a birth defect, probably. Something that made him worthless in Vraxil society. The child tried to back away, but he couldn't move fast enough. His small body trembled with fear. Tejo raised his hand slowly, palms out in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Hey," he said softly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The child didn't understand Korean, obviously, but tone was something most species could recognize. Tejo kept his voice gentle, the same way he used to talk to his niece before the war. Before everything went to hell. He looked at the child's twisted legs, then down at his own prosthetic. Slowly he tapped his artificial leg with his knuckles. The metallic sound echoed slightly. Then he pointed to the child's malformed appendages and back to his own leg. "Same," he said. "We're the same, kid. Both broken. Both still here." The child's antennae stopped trembling. His eyes, those strange compound eyes, studied Tejo's face carefully. Looking for deception, maybe, or cruelty. Whatever he found must have satisfied him because he didn't pull away when Tejo reached out his hand. The child's upper limb touched Tejo's palm hesitantly. His exoskeleton was cool and smooth, nothing like human skin. But the gesture was unmistakable. Trust, hope, connection. Something broke inside Tejo's chest. Something that had been frozen since the war. He felt tears prick at his eyes and blinked them away quickly. "Not here, not in front of everyone. What's your name?" he asked, even though he knew the child wouldn't understand. The child made a series of clicks and chirps. Vraxil language was impossible for humans to speak, but Tejo tried to memorize the pattern. The child seemed to appreciate the effort. His mandibles moved in what might have been a smile. "I'm Tejo," he said, pointing to himself. Then he pointed to the child and tilted his head in question. The child clicked again, slower this time. It sounded like Kel in the middle of the pattern. "Close enough, Kel," Tejo repeated. "Good to meet you, Kel." Security finally arrived. 6 officers in full armor, 3 human and 3 from other species. Their weapons were drawn but not aimed. "Yet, step away from the Vraxil citizen," the lead officer commanded. He was human, which somehow made it worse. "You're in violation of Treaty Article 47, Section 3. Tejo didn't move. He kept his hand connected to Kel's limb, feeling the small trembles running through the child's body. "He needs help," Tejo said calmly. "He's hurt, hungry, alone." "That's not your concern," the officer said. His weapon rose slightly. "Step away now or we will use force." Tejo looked down at Kel one more time. The child's eyes were wide again, filled with fear. Fear of being abandoned again. "Left behind like trash, I'll come back," Tejo whispered. He didn't know if he could keep that promise. Didn't know if they'd let him. But he said it anyway. "I promise, kid. You're not alone anymore. Neither am I." He stood slowly, hands raised. The officers surrounded him immediately, pulling him away. As they led him toward the security station, Tejo looked back over his shoulder. Kel sat in the same spot, watching him go. His small limb was still raised, as if reaching for someone who finally saw him as more than waste. The galaxy had watched in silence. Now it would watch to see what came next. Tejo didn't know what that would be. He only knew that for the first time in 3 years, he had a reason to face tomorrow, a reason to try. A small broken child who needed someone to care, and a broken veteran who needed someone to care for.